HOAs are getting out of hand here in Boise. So this video, I want to talk a bit about how HOAs are ripping people off here in the Treasure Valley. They actually are, and what you should expect from an HOA if you are thinking of moving to Boise. So let me start first with some recent laws that have been passed here in Idaho relating to HOAs. So about 3 years ago, the Idaho legislature signed into law the Idaho Code 553205. So it was signed by the governor on May 31st, 2021, and went into effect in July of that year. So 3 years ago. And a few things that went into effect in 2022 have been totally ignored by HOAs here in the Treasure Valley. And these are things that I've not just seen once or twice, things that I see almost in every transaction. So let me get into two specific details. Number one of the things that they passed, they signed into law in that legislature, is HOAs cannot charge a statement of account fee. Let me just read you the law so that you can hear it for yourself. Here's what it says. No fee may be charged by a homeowners association or its agent for providing a statement of the member's assessment account. Charging a fee for any statement of the member's assessment account required by this section is a violation of the Idaho Consumer Protection Act, Chapter 6, Title 48, Idaho Code. So the law is actually really clear, even for somebody who's not a lawyer like me. You can't charge a fee for a statement of account. Now, just in case you didn't know, a statement of account or a member's assessment account is simply a statement that shows what the homeowner owes to the HOA. So any assessments, charges, fees, transfer fees, etc. Now, a statement of account is a statement that every single escrow officer is going to get on any transaction from the HOA, because the escrow officer has to know how much the homeowner owes to the HOA so that they can prorate the fees. Really clear, the HOA cannot charge a fee for that statement, but it's totally disregarded by almost every HOA here in the valley. Now, sometimes they'll rename this fee. They'll call it an estoppel fee, or they will call it a disclosure fee. But however you name it, the law is really clear that you cannot charge a fee. But look at the latest transaction that I had. This is a transaction that closed maybe 2 weeks ago or so. My buyer was charged a $275 disclosure fee, a $400 setup fee, and a $400 transfer fee. Now, I don't know why they're being charged both a setup and a transfer fee. If you're setting up an HOA account, then you don't need to transfer it. And if you're transferring the HOA account, then you don't need to set it up. But this $275 fee is actually against the law. So the next question you probably ask me, okay, well, what did you do about it, Benj? The answer is there's not a lot, unfortunately, that I can do. Usually, I get a closing statement from the escrow company a day, maybe if I'm lucky, 2 days before closing. A lot of times it's actually the day of closing. So at that point, we're closing in a day, maybe that very same day. And so what can I do? I can write the HOA and say, hey, you're charging my clients a fee that you shouldn't charge. It might take them 3-4 days to respond to my email though. And in a best case scenario, they might respond right away within a day or two. And they might say, thank you for your letter, but we actually, we're allowed to charge this fee. And I got to go back and forth and say, no, actually, Idaho Code 553205 says that you can't charge that fee. And then they may say, which is what I've heard some HOAs are doing now, they may say, oh, well, we actually have a different interpretation of that law. We believe that that law says that you can't charge a fee to the homeowner. We're not charging the homeowner, we're charging the escrow company. Well, guess who the escrow company is passing that fee along to? The new homeowner. In any case, even if that's your interpretation of the law, that's not what the law says. The law says no fee may be charged by a homeowners association or its agents for providing a statement of the member's assessment account. So unfortunately, this is something that is being totally disregarded by HOAs here in the Treasure Valley, and there's not a lot that we can do about it. Hey, before I move on, hit the thumbs up button if this video has been helpful for you. The second thing that was decided in this law is that HOAs cannot charge a transfer fee unless it's explicitly stated in the CC&Rs of that subdivision. Again, let me read to you what the law says. It says this, quote, "A homeowners association may not charge a transfer fee unless the authority to do so is expressly stated in the declaration of the CC&Rs. The transfer fee may be charged only by the homeowners association, and no portion of the transfer fee may be paid to or allocated to a third party, including any board member or the homeowners association agent or manager." In other words, the law very clearly says you can't charge a transfer fee unless it explicitly says in the CC&Rs that you have the authority to charge a transfer fee, and that transfer fee cannot be passed along to the management company. Buzzer. This also is not being followed by the HOA companies here in the Valley. I reread all of the CC&Rs in my latest transaction, and I didn't see anything in those CC&Rs that say the HOA is allowed to charge a transfer fee. Well, according to the law that was passed in 2022, that is illegal. Let me digress for just a minute though. Look at the closing statement again. Here's what my buyer was charged just in this past closing. A $400 setup fee, $400 transfer fee, and a $275 statement of account fee. So that's a total of $1,075 that was given over to the HOA. That's a lot of money. But look at how much the escrow officer actually got for doing all of her work. Now, the escrow officer is the one who actually communicated with all of the parties, gathered all of the money, figured out who owes what based on the number of days that they lived in the property. The escrow officer actually did the work. She got a total of $650. So the HOA company got $400 more than the escrow officer who actually did all of the work. Now, I actually followed up this subdivision just a little bit more, and I noticed that there are 363 homes in that subdivision. So if you do the math, over the past several years, as this subdivision has been built, at $1,075 per home, the HOA has been given $390,225. All of that money has flowed into that subdivision's HOA coffers just in setup, transfer, and statement fees. That's $325,000. That's highway robbery. I mean, where is all of this money going? And half of that money, guaranteed, is actually being collected illegally. Now let me shift gears for a second here. A lot of people will ask me, what are HOAs allowed to do and not allowed to do? Well, also in this new law that was passed 3 years ago, the HOAs are not allowed to forbid homeowners from installing solar panels on their homes. They also are not allowed to, and this might be important for you, they're not allowed to prohibit you, the homeowner, from flying a political flag or a political sign. Now, that's important to remember. You know, if you want to put a MAGA sign in your yard, for example, and they send you a letter and they say, sorry, you can't do that, we don't allow that, you can go tell them to read Idaho Code 553209 and 553210, and then they can go pound sand, because the Idaho Code says no homeowners association may add, amend, or enforce any CC&R that has the effect of prohibiting the display of a political sign. So as you can see, I'm a little bit fired up about this. HOAs have gotten a little bit out of hand in recent years. They're trying to get more power than what they're allowed, and they're charging you fees that they shouldn't be charging you. Another thing that was passed in this law is the homeowners association is not allowed to limit the rental of your property. Now this one's a bit tricky, because basically what it says is if when you bought the property, there was nothing in the CC&Rs that said that you're not allowed to rent your property, then they can't just suddenly change the rules and say, hey, we're not allowing anybody to rent property in their community from this time forward. They have to abide by what is written in the CC&Rs. Now, if when you purchased the property it said in the CC&Rs that you can't rent out your property, then you're not allowed to, according to this statute. Now, I know a lot of you watching are coming from out of state, so let me just shift gears for a minute and answer a few common questions that a lot of out-of-state clients often ask me about HOAs. So one question I'm commonly asked is, how much are HOAs here in the Treasure Valley? And the answer really is that it depends. Depends on which neighborhood you're going to, how big your house is, etc. But I would say that on average, probably the median price for HOAs here in the Treasure Valley is about $600 per year. Now again, that's gonna depend on where you are and also on how old HOAs are. Usually the older the HOA, the cheaper the annual cost is going to be. I've seen HOAs as low as $50 per year, but I've also seen them as high as $1,500 per year. So it really depends on how old the HOA is and on what sort of amenities are offered in the subdivision. But I would, generally speaking, put it this way. If you're buying a 25-year-old, $500,000 house, you probably could expect to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 per year in HOA fees. If you're buying a brand new $650,000 house, your HOA fees are probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $700 per year. The second question that I'm often asked is what percentage of homes here in the Treasure Valley have HOAs? And the answer is a high percentage of them do. Every new home that you buy here in the Treasure Valley that is part of a subdivision, which is considered to be 5 homes or more, is going to have an HOA, and that's by law. Usually though, homes that were built before 1990 won't have HOAs, and that's because these older HOAs have sort of tended to disband after about 20 or 30 years. Now, one thing that is important to remember though, is that even if you're buying a home, let's say that was built in 1975, that doesn't have an HOA, it still is going to have CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Every single home actually has some sort of CC&Rs attached to them. And that's because you're not allowed to, fly a 200-foot sign on top of your roof. There's got to be some sort of limitations on what you can and can't do with your property. So that's important to remember, especially if you're buying a home that doesn't, quote, have an HOA. There's no governing body that meets yearly. That does not mean that it doesn't have CC&Rs. Now, a lot of times these CC&Rs that are part of HOAs that don't exist, they're part of neighborhoods that have no HOAs, they're going to be very minimal. You're going to read them and it's going to have some instructions for the builder. How's the builder supposed to build homes in that neighborhood? A lot of times they're going to be very minimalistic and there's not really going to be sort of anything that limits what you can or can't do. But you do have to be aware that they do exist, because I have seen some older CC&Rs from, let's say, the 80s where there's no HOAs, but tucked away in one of those paragraphs it says no chickens allowed in the neighborhood. Now, if that's the case and there's a restriction, let's say, on chickens, but there's no homeowners association, you actually don't have the mechanism to enforce those CC&Rs. So the likelihood of somebody somehow complaining and forcing you to take away your chickens in a neighborhood that, says you're not allowed to have chickens, but there's no HOA, is probably going to be pretty low. The third question that I'm often asked is, what do HOAs cover? Let me start first with what they don't cover. First thing is that HOAs hardly ever cover landscaping. So if you're paying $600 per year, you may think that, oh yes, that means I don't have to mow my lawn anymore. The answer is that's probably not the case. Almost never does an HOA cover landscaping for the individual properties in that subdivision. That's something that the homeowner has to do. You're gonna have to mow your front and backyard. You're gonna have to take care of your own trees. Another thing that is not commonly known is that frequently the irrigation water is not included in the yearly HOA fee. I pay like $35 per year for my irrigation water, so it's actually really cheap, but that's usually paid separate from the HOA fee. So what do HOA fees cover? Number one, they're gonna cover use of amenities. Now, depending on how new your subdivision is, you're gonna have more or less amenities. Nearly every subdivision that has an HOA is gonna have some sort of an open space for your dog or your kids to run around in. So I would say if you're paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 per year, you're probably gonna have some sort of a little field or mini park of some sort that has grass, maybe a little bit of a playground for the kids with some playground equipment for the kids to play on. But that's about it. If you're paying, let's say, $400 a year, you might have a basketball court to shoot some hoops on, and maybe some swings and some additional playground equipment. If you're paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $500, $600, $700 per year, you may have access to a pool. And then if you're paying, $800 to $1,000 a year, usually what's going to be included in that is going to be more amenities. So things like pickleball courts, barbecue pits, clubhouses, public areas for you to kind of rent out or to use, those sort of things. Second thing that your HOA fees will cover is the common area maintenance. So the HOA will hire a landscaping company to mow the lawn, take care of the trees, take care of the other landscaping issues, sprinklers. And the final thing that an HOA will do is they keep the neighborhood looking nice. Now, it's hard to put a price on this, but ultimately this is what you're paying for when you pay for an HOA. Now, I know people don't like to submit the color of the house that they want to paint to the HOA Architectural Committee. I get it. I don't like to submit it to the HOA Architectural Committee either, but I would just encourage you to walk in a neighborhood that doesn't have an HOA and just look around, see what you see. You're not gonna have to walk very far before you see an RV in the driveway, you see a car that's broken down, set up on blocks with no wheels on it, and you'll see weeds that are as tall as the house's roof. So for better or worse, that's what the HOA is there for, to crack the whip, to get people off of their lazy butts so that they take care of their homes and keep the neighborhood looking nice. And the final question that I am often asked is, are HOAs here in the Treasure Valley overbearing? Some neighborhoods do have a little bit stricter rules than I would be comfortable with, but if I had to generalize, I would say that most HOAs here in the Treasure Valley are not overbearing. I kind of go back and forth with HOAs though. Sometimes I feel like they're a good thing. On the other hand, sometimes I don't really like them. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say though. What do you think? Do you think HOAs are a good thing or a bad thing? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions about real estate in the Treasure Valley, please reach out to me. I've worked with a ton of people that have called me up from YouTube, people like you that are watching my videos. I really am a real estate agent here in the Valley. I make videos here in my office when I'm not out showing homes or listing properties. So please reach out to me if you have any questions about real estate. If you're thinking of moving to Boise, I'd be more than happy to work with you.